there is a COVID inquiry that will play a pretty fundamental role. And that one of those fundamental roles will not just simply be in the response of the government and health authorities and the likes to what was the pandemic of COVID, which I have to say is still carrying on if the wastewater things. Isn't it ironic? We've got a new wave of COVID going through, new waves of infections, and it's like, whoop-de-doo. New Zealand's just moved on. It's almost as if we've ignored it. Don't even take it as seriously as the flu these days. It's really odd. 3 years ago, God, look where we were. But one of the things that will come out of this inquiry is whether or not we can trust the information that we are provided by people that we should be able to trust. And I know some of you will laugh and say, oh, God, trust politicians. But if they're the only source of information, they say they're the singular source of truth, it is important that we trust them. And also the information that we're provided by public health officials. That will be tested through this COVID inquiry, particularly by the extended terms of reference, and whether or not this vaccine that we were provided with, this mRNA vaccine, which was relatively revolutionary for the time, which I imagine, though, will still be the future of, though, vaccines, did the job that it was said it was going to do, was amped to the point that the risks that were involved were downplayed, and therefore there were those placed at risk as a consequence. Now, somebody I've got a great deal of time for, she has, I think, displayed a typical and absolutely apposite scientific, academic lens to the information that's available, is the co-director of the Global Vaccine Data Network, Associate Professor Helen Petousis-Harris from Auckland University, and she joins us now. Helen, great pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome.
Oh, kia ora, Michael.
We've talked before now, but since we've talked, you have become the co-director of the Global Vaccine Data Network. First of all, tell me, what is that?
It's actually a consortium that was launched early 2019, actually, with a colleague of mine. We had a good previous collaboration. So we launched this entity back then, and spent the next year trying to find, or the next couple of years really, trying to find some funding to do globally coordinated studies. So really, really big studies to look at the things that are so rare that you really can't do them in any single population because you need a lot more people.
Now, my understanding is that as part of that research network, you looked into particularly myocarditis, the pericarditis studies. You've looked at all the international evidence about that and the risks associated with the vaccines from those particular maladies. What have you now come to the conclusion of in looking at the study that you're involved in?
I think we've had taking those conditions, the myo and pericarditis. There's been it's consistently been a risk associated with the mRNA vaccines, and that's been known since early 2021 and expressed by all sorts of health entities like the WHO, etc. So we knew that. We also knew that the risk was low, and it was and the risk of having the same thing happen even and usually a lot worse if you've got the infection. And then over the next few weeks to months, we started to get a handle on sort of the magnitude of what that was. And at all times, it's always been a lot. Your risk after having the infection or with the infection is a lot higher than that with the vaccine. So that's sort of been there all the way along, and I think the data's pretty consistent. So what we've done, we included 13 different medical conditions in this piece of work. And we could get a little more granular because we had such huge populations across the globe. But also people, like different countries, have different vaccines and different schedules. So we looked at all the vaccines that were used, and whether someone had a mRNA first and then they had an AstraZeneca and then they had another mRNA, all of those combinations. And then we provided the outputs on a lovely, pretty interactive dashboard that anyone can go and have a look at.
Right. And what was the conclusion that you reached?
What we would have expected, and that is that there is an increased risk after the mRNA vaccines of this heart inflammation, and that we were able to identify the risk period too quite clearly, which is, in a window period following the vaccine. We looked at different window periods, and you see it really highlighted in for myocarditis in that week after vaccination, or about a week after vaccination.
So who are the people most at risk? I'm reading some of these studies now, and it would appear to be men or boys aged 15 to 35. Is that right?
Yeah, more likely, and actually these conditions are actually more common in males anyway, and we don't really know why we're seeing this association with the vaccine more likely in males, more likely young males. And it was also more likely after the second dose as opposed to the first.
The COVID inquiry is going to keep on going. I had John Whitehead, one of the commissioners, on last week, and he mentioned that the expanded terms of reference will actually start to look at this and who knew what when as well. Do you think the Ministry of Health knew, when you say early 2021, what are you talking? January, February, March, July, May?
I think the first messages were coming out of the World Health Organization and other authorities March/April, and that's certainly when that became widely sort of circulated and recommendations were made about needing to keep people informed of this. And over the next few months, so by the middle of the year, I think there was reasonably well established that this was a risk associated with the vaccine. Very small and also very clear, what the risk benefit was, but it was clear that it was there.
So, we've had 2 coronial inquiries, I think, since then, and one of the things that the coroners have made is that those risks were not adequately communicated to particularly those men in that group before they were vaccinated, and that those who were giving the vaccination, coming out of the coronial inquiry anyhow, were not sufficiently informed that there was a problem either. Do you expect that to be part of your evidence? I'm assuming you're giving evidence, Helen, to the COVID inquiry?
I haven't prepared anything. I hope that would be included. It's a very important thing to include, and my opinion, there was not sufficient information given to people. Myself, I have three young men in that age group, and so they have 3 doses between them. Well, it's 9 doses altogether, sorry. Not one single time were they informed about this. Of course, they got all informed by their mother, but they were not informed about this. And so neither were any other young men I knew. So yeah, I absolutely agree with that, and that needs to be part of the inquiry.